Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter here, and today we are painting Fráecht. Fráecht? I really don't know how to pronounce it, but this is the guy. I put some modeling sand on the base and I gave it all a grey priming coat. And that's where we start. First, the skin areas, and to cover that I'm using a traditional flow with Bugman's Glow, and we're going to be highlighting that with some Cadian flesh tone. The trick with Cadian flesh tone is to leave the Bugman's Glow in the recesses of the fingers, so you see a slight part of the darker color, but not too much, because the Bugman's Glow is too dark as a skin tone for this model. Next, we wash it up with some Wayland Flesh Shade, and make sure to thin that down just a little bit. I usually use a 50-50 mix. Mix it with some Lamia medium, or just water is okay. The face is very little visible, but there are some nice details in there. Afterwards, we're going to be using Kislev Flesh for the highlights. These are the final highlights, so mainly focus on the knuckles and the top areas of your model that would reflect the most light. The beard I did with Mechanicus Standard Grey, and afterwards I highlighted that with some Administratum Grey. I did it off camera, so that's the reason I'm telling you. Use some null if you want to add some detail. Next, some Corvus Black to the inner robes. And also the feathers on his back, which is a very prominent feature of this model, the big shoulder piece of feathers. So make sure to pay a lot of attention to that. Now once everything is dry, we're going to dry brush some Administratum Grey on those feathers. And make sure to wipe off as much paint as you can from the brush, because you do not want to cover it with paint. You want to be slightly touching the edges. When you're done with that, we're going to repeat this process with some pure white scar. And make sure to absolutely focus on the very tips of the feathers to give them a nice highlight as they were sticking out. And I use a smaller dry brush for this one, of course, because you want to focus on the tiny details. After that, some Administratum Grey on the inner robes as a highlight. And in the end, you should have something that looks like this. A nice grey feathery look. There's some feathers on the staff as well, make sure to take them in the process. And then we're going to continue on the outer robe, and I used some Thondia Brown and darkened it with some Abaddon Black to about a 50-50% mix. It's a large area, so make sure to mix plenty of paint when you start, so you don't get any color differentiation in the process. And you should have something looking like this. Remember to do the hood as well. Looking very nice already. Alright, let's continue. Now we're going to be using Thondia Brown as a first highlight. It's a natural blend because we're just going one tad brighter than before, and you can cover a lot of areas on the cloak with this pure Thondia Brown, and just leave the darker parts in the shaded areas. It's as simple as that. Now we're going to be highlighting it, and each highlight you focus on smaller areas. And for this one I mixed some Baneblade Brown into the Thondia Brown and just touched the folds, the top of the folds, the top areas hanging over his arm, the head of course, the top of his head. And when you get to the lower parts of the cloak, you focus on the low areas as they are sticking outwards just a little bit. They would catch more light. We're going to take it one step further with some Baneblade Brown, and for this I just did a very edge highlight. Then the inner robe, or the chest piece actually, dried bark and Abaddon black as a base color. It's the chest piece, and a little bit of it is sticking out below his belt. Make sure not to forget that part. We're going for a leathery look here. So you should have something like this by now. Then we're going to use some pure dried bark to highlight that chest piece. Then some rock art flash for the small stitches that are on those on the chest, holding all the leathery parts together. If you want, you can use a wash of maybe some Seraphim Sepia to give it an extra tone. Then I mixed some dried bark and Karak stone and used it on the belt. Next, some Zandri dusts mixed with Steel Legion drab for the inner robes. It gives a nice color combination, not too bright, not too dark, and it goes very well with the dark outer robes. I used some Mournfang brown on the big belt around his waist. And I'm using some pure Zandri dust as a highlight on the inner robes. Then some Dûmble brown mixed with Mournfang brown and Karak stone. An interesting mix, but I like the color combination for the staff. It's kind of an orangey wooden look. I next mixed some Bugman's Glow to Karak stone to highlight this. And then we're going to focus with Word Bearer's Red on the red straps around his arms, the staff. They're on several parts. They're holding the skulls in place, etc. I used some Karak stone to highlight the inner robes. There's some parts on the arms, a little bit of sleeve showing. And I also used the Karak stone as a base color for all the bone areas. There's many of them on his chest, on the staff, on his back, on his left hand he's holding some kind of beads with some bones dangling on it. So make sure to cover all of that. Then there is a small sword on his right hip and I used some lead belcher as a base color for that one. You can darken it down with some null oil if you want. I used some Corvus black for the hilt of the sword. It's not really accessible, but you'll manage. Then some Thondia brown for the boots. Above the boots is kind of a woolen cover around his leg, and for that I used some Administratum grey or a bright grey, and I washed it with some Apothecary white. That gives a nice bright shade, not too dark because null oil would darken it more, and I wanted to keep it bright. Then I continued with some dried bark on the beads he's holding in his left hand. I'm a bit out of focus here, sorry about that. And I highlighted that with some Balor brown. There's like a bead chain he's holding with some bones dangling on it. Next, Bugman Glow for the red straps all around the model as a highlight. And that's the final detail for this model. Now for the base I used some Garagax Sewer, a contrast paint. It gives a nice dirty look, and you can choose whatever you want of course, but I went for this because I wanted to make it look as dirty, a bit of dirty ground. Add some static grass and that's it. Thank you so much for watching again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please consider subscribing to my channel as I keep making more videos as we go along. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!